Testing, testing. Ready to go.
So
This is an interview by Roland Matthies on January the 31st, 1995, of Carl Bohn of the Delscamp Paint and Glass Company, located on West High Street in Springfield. The interview being made for the Clark County Historical Society as we develop our portfolio of business interviews from various owners in Clark County. Carl, you are the son of Carl Bohn.
Right.
Are you known as Junior still?
No, I'm not a junior.
Not anymore.
No, he was Carl F. and I'm Carl E.
I can remember when you were a neighbor of ours and I was a neighbor of yours on North Limestone Street.
That's correct.
We moved out there from the corner of Madison and Fountain. It was the first house we owned in Springfield. This was in 1944. And we moved there because the traffic was so little due to gas rationing.
Yeah, that's fact.
Then rationing went off and zoom, zoom.
Right. Yeah, well, my dad built a house there in either 1940 or 41, about at 2325 North Limestone, which was about, I think, maybe 4 houses south of your
Ours
home.
is 2341.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a nice place to be.
It surely was.
Nice.
Who was in your family? How many?
I have 2 sisters. Jean, who is older than I, and Betty Lou, who is 3 years younger than I. And my mother's still living. She was just 92 last December the 7th.
And where is she living?
She lives in Florida in a retirement home. Not a, she's well. She doesn't require any medication. It's just strictly a retirement home.
Great. What city?
In Fort Myers.
Lovely place.
Yeah, real nice.
My favorite beach, Fort Myers.
It's nice. It's nice.
Well, I can remember, of course, I came here in 1943 to business manage the Army Air Corps program for Wittenberg. And involved in that was acquiring paint, among other things, for the fixing up of our buildings to satisfy the U.S. Army. And I know that Delscamp was involved. And your main competitor at that time, I think, was Lau Brothers.
We always like to look at them. They were always a lot of paint stores in Springfield. You had Lau Brothers and Pittsburgh and at that time, every hardware store, and there were a lot of those, carried a line of paint.
That's right, I'd forgotten that. That's true of Lion Hardware, I know.
Oh, absolutely. And they were all good lines of paint. And at that time, when I came here in 1950 to work for my dad, who came here in 1930, and eventually ended up owning the store. But all of the hardware stores had a line of paint, and believe it or not, some of the drugstores carried a line of paint.
Is that so?
That's fact.
Such as, what, you remember any particular store?
Oh boy, that's pressing my memory a lot. I can't remember any of the drugstores in Springfield that did, but I had one account in St. Paris that was a drugstore that carried paint and wallpaper.
Oh.
Another one in Bell Center, Ohio, that had a line of paint.
That's like a furniture store being an undertaker establishment.
Well, almost, but when you stop and think about it, it kind of fit in. At that time, when I started here, I covered 4 counties as a salesman. I was on the road for 10 years.
Is that so?
It eventually came to the point to where it was no longer profitable as they became more full-fledged paint stores. They took the paint lines away from the drugstores because they spent more time with their drugs, naturally, than the paint line. So it eventually died, like a lot of good things. But it was a lot of fun at the time.
Your dad came into this business in 1930?
In 1930.
What had he been doing?
Well, it's kind of hard for me to remember because I was born in 27. But he, at one time, during that period of time, and that was the height of the Depression, I'm told. And anyhow, he got a job here. And I remember that it was either $17 or $19 a week. I heard my mom and dad talking about it. And I think it was 19, but over a period of a year or so, they advanced him to the rear back to $17 because things weren't going so well at that time.
Yeah.
But he stayed here, and eventually, in the year of 1947, himself and another man who was a paint salesman for the Benjamin Moore Company purchased this business from Art Stahl.
How do you spell Stahl?
S-T-O-L-L.
I didn't know him. He had the Delscamp name?
You want me to start back to when the Delscamp became a company?
Right.
Well, in Dayton, Ohio, there was the Delscamp family. And I believe that the gentleman's name, we call him Grandpa Delscamp, whose name was Harry, and he was in the paint business with another person whose name I can't remember, but they owned a paint store in Dayton. And then came the flood of 1913. Do you remember that?
I remember hearing about it.
It was very devastating, as I understand it, and there was water in downtown Dayton 10 and 12 feet high. So after the flood was over with, Mr. Delscamp and his friend decided he didn't want to be in the paint business anymore, and particularly in Dayton, I guess. So Mr. Delscamp started the Delscamp Paint and Glass Company, of which he was the major stockholder with, and I don't know who they were, 5 or 6 other minor stockholders, one of them being Art Stahl, person named Art Stahl.
Where was the store? Wasn't it on
That
3rd?
was on 118 North Main Street.
North Main.
Yeah, 118 North Main in downtown Dayton. And it was a good-sized, big paint store. And that was 1913. Well, over a period of years, we come up to 1920, and he decided that he would build a store, start a store in Springfield, which he did. And one of his better employees was Art Stahl. So Mr. Stahl then came to Springfield and ran the Springfield Delscamp Paint and Glass Company.
And where was it located?
It was located at 71 West Main Street, which is just right to the rear of the store that you're sitting in here today.
Right to the rear?
Right on Main Street instead of on High Street, yeah. When they moved over here to this building in 1940, they just backed the trucks across the alley and brought the merchandise over here. Let's see, where do we want to go?
And Mr. Stahl was the owner.
Mr. Stahl was the
operator,
owner and operator. I'm not sure whether there were any other stockholders or not. This is a corporation today, as it was then.
Did Mr. Stahl have other business interests, or was this?
No, he was a paint man.
He was.
And he was an excellent paint man. He knew all there was to know about a can of paint. It was not like the paint business is today. If you wanted to paint your house, you bought a couple 100 pounds of lead and a few gallons of linseed oil and a few gallons of turpentine and a can of dryer, and got the stuff all beat together. It took you a couple days just to do that.
I did it myself.
I never will forget, old Tom Fazio was a painting contractor in Springfield. And even after the days when lead and oil was out and ready-mixed house paint was in, when Tom would pull his truck up to a house to do the job, he would park in front and he would get out his tarps, drop cloths, and lay them down on the street so he wouldn't spill any paint on the street. And he'd pour his ready-made house paint in his old lead and oil vat like he did years ago, so that everybody would think he was still putting on lead and oil, I presume. But that was one of the funny little incidents.
I can remember how that lead sank to the bottom of the can, and you had to stir and stir like crazy.
And when a truckload of lead and oil came in, you had a day's work that really tested your muscles on you. That came in the latter part of the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And then starting on into the 50s, you had practically all your paint was ready mixed at that time then. And then along came latex paint, which of course made painting a whole lot easier. But it was like anything, it was brand new. It didn't work as good as it was supposed to right off of the bat.
Yeah.
But today, latex house paint is probably better in most cases and less trouble to everyone using latex or water-thin paint rather than an oil base.
Mm-hmm. Providing they prepare the surface properly.
That has always been the key to painting, and it is today, and it will be in the future.
Yeah.
Prepare the surface. You can't build a house on sand, and you can't put paint on an insecure surface.
How many employees do you think there were here at the time your dad joined in?
Well, let me see now. When my dad first came here, there was, of course, Art Stahl. There was a truck driver. We've always had a truck driver or delivery man that does just about everything. So they've always been good people. Probably 5 full-time employees.
And did you handle glass at that time?
Yeah, we have some pictures out here on the wall that maybe you'd like to look at, that I thought maybe someday, if like the Historical Society were interested,
Very much.
and I would turn them over to them,
Right.
because they're real old things.
They need to be preserved.
Well, it takes somebody that's really interested in doing it. And does the Barman person still handle the society?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, he's very good. I wouldn't be afraid to give them to him, because I'm sure they'd get down in posterity, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So we got a lot of that stuff around here.
We have one of the greatest collections in the state of Ohio. Trouble is, most of it's down in Memorial Hall, where the roof leaks.
Yeah, that's
And
a
we're
problem.
still working hard to try to find
Well, don't you think
finances.
that over a period of time, as more people become interested in the history of the things that they should know,
We hope so.
that it will might eventually get a building of their own that's suitable?
We have dreams. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
dreams turn into realities a lot of times.
What
But-
kind of a vehicle was being used for delivery at your first recollection?
Well, when, and I can't tell you the exact year, but it was around 1931 or 2, my dad somehow or other could see the future in the northern part of the city that would be a nice place to live. And they had built St. Teresa's church and school, and my sister was going to start in St. Teresa's school, even though we lived on Rose Street.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 6 months or so of her first year in the first grade of school, she rode the trolley car from Rose Street to St. Teresa's and then back home after school in the evening, until we then moved on the north side of town.
I don't even know where Rose Street is, and I've lived here since 1943.
Well, if you are familiar with the south end of town, there's like Liberty, Euclid,
Yeah.
Grand Southern, and
LEGS.
then on the other side of Clifton Avenue, you've got Rice, Rose, and Catherine, right before you come to in Wilson, right before you come to Hayward Junior High School and the old Springfield High football field.
I see.
So that's where Rose Street was, and the trolley car used to go out Clifton Avenue and come downtown and pull in the depot downtown and then go on out the middle of Fountain Avenue.
Uh-huh.
That was where the trolley tracks went. And then she got out and went to St. Teresa's School. That was in 1931.
Mm-hmm. What kind of a delivery truck did you have then?
I have a picture out here on the wall of a, I think it was an International. But what I was going to tell you is Dad borrowed the truck to move some of the stuff prior to the heavy stuff. And I remember riding from the Rose Street out to June Street where we moved to, the first house north, and it was on June Street, and it's still there, first double house on June Street, which is now Warren Drive.
Oh?
Which is on the south side of Roosevelt Junior High School.
Uh-huh. I didn't know they changed it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a story behind Warren Drive, too. But anyhow, it was an international, and it had canvas. It had a roof on the back, but canvas was the side of it, and you rolled it up in the summertime, and you rolled it down in the wintertime or when it wasn't raining. Yeah, it was an old international.
Been some interesting history involving international trucks.
One thing kind of runs into another. It's just like you and I sitting here talking. You know, we can go on tangents here on the trucks, the people. Some of the people that I knew that worked here, a fellow named Ralph Funk, whose son now comes in and just recently retired from the Ameritech or High Bell, whichever one you want to call it. But all these things run together. It's amazing.
Yeah. Now you took over the business from your dad while he was living?
Oh yeah. He bought the business in '47. Him and another fellow. His name was oh boy. I'll think of it in a minute anyhow. But anyhow, him and another person bought the business. He then bought this other man out in about 1955. I came to work here in '50. And then he was the major stockholder, my dad was. And he gave me a few shares of stock. And he stayed here then until he retired in 1967. In 1959 or 60, a young man named Bill Dunn came to work here as a bookkeeper. And when my dad decided that he was going to quit and sell the place, he gave me the option to either buy the business by myself and operate it, or to do whatever I wanted, whatever. But anyhow, to make a long story short, Bill Dunn, William Dunn, who we hired in '59 or '60, then became the minor stockholder with myself. So him and I have all the stock for the business.
He's still involved?
He is still involved, yes sir. He's been here, I've been here since '50, he's been here since '59 or '60.
How many employees do you have now?
We have only 3 full-time and 1 part-time.
Still rely on one truck?
Yeah, one truck just about does it all. We do more glass work than we used to do. We're in a sort of a position at this time in progress that we don't have the money to spend at the big company-owned stores, which are the majority of paint stores today, are not privately owned like ours is.
Yeah.
We have always managed to maintain our independence. We feel for the better. At one time, the major line that we had at one time, somewhere in the neighborhood of 67, wanted to be able to come into our store and to tell us what they expected us to do with their line of paint, and we did not find that tolerable. So at that time, we dropped that line and picked up another major line.
You want to tell us what the lines were?
Well, this wouldn't make
For history?
For history?
Sure.
Well, the people that we had enjoyed doing business with for many, many, many years, clear back to 1920 when this store was started, was Benjamin Moore.
Well, I thought so.
And
I remember that.
Yeah, and they...
Where were they located?
Well, their main manufacturing plant at that time was in Cleveland. They've since, they're a big company and they're a good company. But we remember the days when a salesman came to town and he walked in your store at 8 o'clock in the morning and along with your salesman went out and pounded the pavement for a day or two. When the evening time come, you said, come on out the house for dinner, Charlie, or whoever it may have been. And you had a friendly relationship, which you took for granted. But over a period of years, I guess if you had thought about it, you wouldn't have took it for granted. You could call if you had a problem. You could call and talk to the president of the company. You'd say, hi, John. Hi, Carl. How's everything in Springfield?
Mm-hmm.
That died, or was in the process of dying.
About when?
Somewhere probably in about the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
The personal part of business left, and it was strictly on a dollar and cents basis, which was kind of hard to swallow after having done it the other way.
Yeah. You switched to what main line?
We took on the Bruning line at that time, which was made in Baltimore, and I'm not sure whether they had another plant or not, but they have like 4 or 5 plants now. Florida, and they have something in Indianapolis, a big warehouse in Indianapolis. It's a good line of paint.
We only B-R-U-N?
IMG, the Bruning Paint Company, yeah. Mm-hmm. And, it's a good line, and they work with us. It was kind of difficult for the big paint companies because some of the smaller companies were going in, and at that time, discount houses started becoming one on every corner.
Yeah.
And everything was being bought and sold on dollars and cents, which, as you know, is not the best way in the world to do things.
Right.
We had the Pratt and Lambert line, which we still have, and that dates back to 1920 with us also, when this company here started.
When I think of Kmart carrying house paint, I just can't put the two together.
Well, Dutch Boy was one of the first paint lines. At that time, to show you how business was, we had 5 lines of paint in here. We had the Benjamin Moore line and the Pratt and Lambert line, and we had Dutch Boy, National Lead Company, and we also had a line called Barreled Sunlight, which was made in Rhode Island. A real terrific brand of paint. But they were eventually bought out by the Pittsburgh Plate Glass Company. So that pretty much took care of them.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's about the time that probably maybe later on Benjamin Moore got, if you got 2 or 3 or 4 lines of something in a store that are competing with one another, each guy thinks he'd like to be on the top shelf.
Sure.
And you got to do a juggling act to say you're all going to be on the same shelf. So that's why things happened the way they did. I can understand it. I don't appreciate it, but that's the way the business is done.
Now, with Pittsburgh Plate Glass having a store in the same block as Delscamp, how did you compete with a big national outfit on glass?
Well, like all of the glass work that we did at that time, basically, we sold a lot of glass to the Board of Education. That's when the local outfits bought local. I'm making a point here.
Yes.
And
'tis no more.
To this day, I'm disgruntled with the fact that the people that run the Board of Education and some of the other institutions in this town decided that it would be better for a few cents on a gallon to buy paint out of Dayton or Cleveland or Louisville or wherever it may be. It's not right. It's not right. The people in Clark County put their money into the taxes to live good and to live in this area, and not to see their money sent to another area.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's the way things are done again today, unfortunately.
You were doing business largely with the Board of Education?
We did. We sold
glass?
just practically all of their paint and glass. And it wasn't given to us. It was on a bid type of a basis, but we couldn't compete with the manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
So who supposedly cut out the middleman, I suppose would be one way to put it.
You remember who the business manager was in those days?
Ed Forer.
Yep.
Beautiful man.
That's Forrer, as I remember.
Oh yeah, he was a great person. And Ed was fair. He was fair.
Yep.
If we were a little too high on something, we said, well, Ed, you know, you got your business to run, and he would, whoever got it, that's who got it.
He reminded me very much of the fellow that ran the Clark County Fair, Putt Sandals. Can you remember him?
Oh yeah, I remember the name, yeah.
There were a couple of characters, both of them, but they were square shooters.
Well, it was just like, at that time, the Board of Education had a lot of, probably more things to do than they got now, because things didn't last as long, they broke. And Jameson Plumbing was a good example of that. When they needed plumbing of any size done, of course they said, how much can you do it for, and is that a fair price, and so on and so forth. Well, maybe somebody from out of town come in with a price on something. But you know, if the pipes froze overnight, Ed Forer would get on the phone and call John Jameson.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd have a guy there in the hour. And you couldn't do that with people.
Yeah.
That was worth a lot of money.
You bet.
But nobody could see it that way.
Yeah. I think Warren Houck did a lot of that.
Warren, let's see. Well, he did some of plumbing. I can't remember all the people that did do these things, but one of the best examples that we are familiar with was with Jameson.
Yeah.
And Ed Forer, and like I say, Ed was a great person.
I saw Johnny Jameson at Kiwanis just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
he comes about once or twice a year.
Yeah.
Looks pretty good.
Oh, he is good.
Yeah.
He's a nice person.
Yeah.
But the banks were the same way, you know. You had who was it that run in the First National Bank?
Roy Clark.
Yeah, he was one. But the banking business was done with these people the same way that the paint business and the plumbing business and so on, Sam.
The president of the bank used to sit right out there where you could talk to him and shake his hand.
You could walk.
And give him the devil.
Well, either or.
Right.
But if they thought that the devil was coming, they was prepared for it.
Yeah.
Because they knew what their companies were doing. But things were, a lot more things were done on a...
You think of Don Bishop and...
well, that's the name I was trying to think of.
He
Don
knew
Bishop.
Everybody in town, and he still does.
You better believe he does.
Yeah, too bad he's had a loss of memory now. He's had a slight stroke.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And he can't recall names anymore.
Yeah, I'm having that problem myself.
I haven't had a stroke either.
Yeah, I don't think I've had one, but that bothers me a little bit. That sometimes I'll think of a guy's first name or last name and not the other name, you know, but I have to sit down, and I do. I'll sit down and I'll do nothing but think about that for a few minutes, and it comes to me.
Good. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, you have to think it out. If you don't, it'll drive you crazy.
What do you think about the location that you have now? Is it still to your advantage? Or does it mean anything anymore?
We'd like to think that it does. And, you know, the more things that are going out north and west, the mall, Meyer Square, the new Lowe's store out there. Unless something happens to the traffic pattern out there, people aren't going to want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a circus.
Yeah.
It's no problem for people to come down here, and we have parking in back and have always had it. Of course, if you live way east, you're going to say I'm too far west, or vice versa. But we still feel that a central location for the type of business that we do is the best thing to be in. We're fortunate enough that when Mr. Stahl moved into the building we're into now, he bought it, and over a period of years, my dad and Mom had the opportunity to buy it, which they did, and then my mom sold it to my wife.
The building?
Yeah, so the building here actually belongs to my wife.
Is there a second story?
This is a three-story building with a full basement, and it's almost 100 years old, but it's a very substantial, well-built.
You don't have any other tenant?
No other tenants.
Yeah.
No. Never even have. We used to take up a whole lot more space with inventory than we do now. That's one of the improvements in the paint business is the color systems, which are, we don't carry hardly any ready-made colors today.
Isn't it something?
In a couple lines we have to.
The way that has changed is remarkable.
Yeah, I can go out there and in a few minutes make any one of 2,000 colors, just by following the pattern and the different bases. So instead of carrying a line like we had years ago of maybe 20 colors in a line, and you were carrying anywhere from 8 to 12 or 15 gallon of each color, you had a lot of inventory. Now I can make any one of those colors out of any one of 4 bases that I could have maybe 15 or 20 gallon of a base, and that's it. And then the freight lines are very, very good today, and I can get stuff overnight out of Indianapolis, and 2 days out of Baltimore. So you don't have to carry the inventory that you had, and you still have access to everything.
I'm reminded of the experience at Navistar where they built that huge building to automate their inventory. It's empty.
Yeah, they want
everything deliveries right now.
Everything right now is just in time, is what it's called.
Yeah.
And they've got their vendors right down the road that one carries this, and one makes that, and one makes this, and one makes that. The only thing that can blow the whole thing out of proportion is if the line shuts down for one reason or another. It happens, but not as frequently as you'd think that it would.
Or if one of the suppliers goes on strike.
That also does it.
Yeah.
If one goes on strike, the rest of them, they might just well close the door because they're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that you still like the downtown location, because I'm sick and tired of that mess out at the mall.
Well, that's what it is. It's just they're putting. Of course, I wouldn't want to be one of the people to have to make a decision on how to do this or how to do that or what road. But I'm sure that people that are schooled in that type of thing should be able to come up with some answers to all the questions that they have out there. Because you just can't have that many people in this confined area like we've got right now. They're going to have some access roads one way or the other. We like it downtown. We've always been here. The only thing that, going back in time, every time a company in Springfield, and let's go back to R&M, to Bar Brothers, Thompson Grinder, Steel Products, every time these people move or sell their business to a outside company, eventually the company moves and Delscamp has lost another customer. Because at one time we sold them all. We didn't sell them everything they buy, but they were all our customers, and we were all friends with them, all the purchasing agents and so on. And you have to look for new customers today if you're going to stay in.
Right. You do much traveling to get business?
Well, that's probably the one real bad fault that we have sort of maybe were too complacent and didn't stay with it as much as we should have. And it's harder to go out and sell these people, than to let them get away to start with. But that's one of the problems that we're trying to address today. one of the things we want to get done. Because if you want to survive, that's what you have to do. It's just like we hardly ever see a paint salesman today.
Is that so?
No, telemarketing.
Yeah.
Telemarketing,
Yeah.
And what telemarketing says is they call me, I pick up the phone, I say hello. They say, what can I do for you? I tell them what they can do for me, or I don't need them. They hang up and call again in 2 weeks.
Isn't that something?
And that's kind of hard to handle after being, we used to use company salesmen along with our salesmen to go out and sell paint. But that's the way business is done today.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate this interview. I think you've done an excellent job of telling me the story.
Oh, it's been my whole life.
Mm-hmm. What we'll do, Carl, is I'll eventually find a typist who will type this up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll bring it back to you to go over it and make any corrections or additions that you want to. Then it goes back for retyping on acid-free paper.
Okay.
And goes into the permanent archives of the Historical Society.
Good.
So you're down.
I'm in history.
You're in history.
Okie dokie.
Thank you very much.
All righty.